All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, we're going to take a break for some politics, at least for the most part, and talk some baseball. Though the general theme actually still holds because some of the things we're going to talk about is follow the money, and where there's
Oh yeah,
money, there's corruption.
exactly. And so I actually think I want to start out on why you've heckled me for not wearing a baseball shirt when I'm the one that wanted to talk about baseball. So I said, all right, fine. And I decided to confuse everybody with my Detroit Tigers hat and my Chicago Cubs shirt. Um, but this is why I love baseball and always have. It was for the longest time my favorite sport, and then I kind of fell out of love with it and stopped playing it, and then I got back into it later in life, um, a little bit, and then a lot when my son started to play. And the reason I've been a lifelong Cubs fan, as painful as that was for so long, is because in Southwest Oklahoma, it's 800 million degrees in the shade in the summertime, and my grandpa didn't have many channels, but he did have a WGN superstation that he could tap into with his antenna. And the Cubs played a lot of day games. I mean, for the longest time, I want to say it wasn't until like 1980 that they finally got lights at Wrigley. They were the holdout when it came to lights and night games. And so you go out during the day, during the morning when it's not too bad, go inside and watch Cubs baseball during the afternoon so you don't bake your brain, and then go back out in the evening to, do some more fishing or whatever. So that is why I've been a lifelong Cubs fan. The Detroit Tigers hat I actually got when I was working at a place that wanted us all to dress up for Halloween. And the easiest thing for me to do was get one of my Hawaiian t-shirts, shave off the beard, and be Magnum PI. But since reading that book that I've referenced, Ty Cobb, A Terrible Beauty, which is a great biography, me and my brother had this long-running argument of who the greatest player ever was. And I said Honus Wagner, and he said Ty Cobb. After reading that book, I think my brother's right. Don't tell him that I think Ty Cobb is the greatest to ever play the game. So that's the other reason I wear the hat.
Well, I've got a shirt that I got as swag from one of my players in a box. He went to the Marlins, and he was then officially sponsored by Under Armour. And he just texted me one day. He said, "What size shoe do you wear?" And I was like, oh, 11 and a half. And I show up one day at home, and there's a box. So going from the floor about this tall and about equally as wide, full of shirts. It had like 6 or 7 pairs of shoes, a bunch of shirts, socks, things like that. And I was looking for my Marlins shirt in honor of that, but I couldn't find it. And then you brought up the confusing everybody, and I was like, oh yeah, I also had the Yankees shirt from when Garrett was drafted, so I could have wore that, and that one actually fits me really good. But to kudos to Under Armour, because this shirt is super old.
Mm,
Because when did I start training him? 2014, I think. So almost 10 years old, and I wear it almost every week,
yeah.
and it's still running good.
I,
So
I, I want to know if they're still good though, because that's something that frustrates me is finding good athletic gear to wear. Because for a long time, I would only ever get Adidas compression shorts because they were the best by far of any I tried. And then I wore them for years before they started to finally wear out. And so I got another pack, and they weren't the same, and they were crap, and they didn't last at all. And
yeah,
so same thing with
Champion Gear
shirts.
underwear did that too. Now Under Armour, what I like about their shirts is even when they're tight fit, they're
Mhm.
long.
Yes.
And I hate when you lift the arms up and your belly is like, "Ooh."
That's what I was wearing earlier. That's another one. That was a Russell Athletic, which was a really good, breathable, stretchable fabric, long, way longer than other ones I usually find. But now they're not the same either. So the last time I went to get a new shirt, and I was like, oh, well, I like those Russell Athletic ones I have. Oh, these aren't the same at all, and they suck. Okay, that's great.
All right, well, on to our topic for the day, so we
Yes.
don't bore everybody with small talk. Uh, you brought me, or you sent me a piece of a video, and
Hmm.
don't worry, we're not going to play all
Nope.
11 hours of it, but it's on youth baseball
Hmm.
and the number of games, and uh, we're going to kind of use that to segue into things about discussions about year-round baseball and the trade-offs with that. And even if you're just into fitness, there's some lessons here as
Oh yeah,
well.
big time.
So you want me to just go straight to the video?
Yeah, let's go straight to the video,
And I
and
even
I'll.
fast forwarded it a little bit from where you had it
Mhm.
because there was a little small talk there as well from where you had it. All right.
Now just pause for a second before you start. All right, so to set this up, so this is the local sports talk here. It's actually a couple of sports talk stations now. I think like 3 or 4 now in DFW. Okay, so on your top left there, as you're looking at the screen, that's a radio guy. That's just he's always been a radio guy. That's what he does. Bottom left is their tech guy producer, who, if I believe, I may be mixing him up. I believe this guy played college basketball, so he is an athlete as well. The top right there is Mike Bassick, and he was kind of a journeyman pitcher for a long time in the majors. His dad played in the majors, played for the Rangers. He played for like half a dozen teams, including the Rangers, and he's a Rangers TV commentator now. The bottom left, that's Derek Holland, which is a name you might know.
Bottom right.
Bottom left as you're looking at it.
Okay, so you said bottom left earlier. So
Oh, top left is the radio guy.
and then you said bottom left, and you
Bottom
introduced
right, the black guy
basketball.
is the producer basketball guy.
Okay, so you said bottom
Okay,
left earlier.
sorry. And then above the producer there, top right, the bald guy is Mike Bassick, and the guy in the hat is Derek Holland. Derek Holland is still playing. He's with an independent minor league team right now.
Does he happen to be left-handed?
He is left-handed.
Do you notice
And
he's wearing an elbow brace?
And we'll get to that because this is where the fitness part and the general stuff comes into it. He is 36 years old. He just had Tommy John surgery a couple of weeks ago. The reason I stress that, haven't you had high school clients who had Tommy John surgery?
Yes. I did post, and I've never had a client actually need it afterwards. But I have in the industry seen dealing with PTs and like actually junior high. So
yeah. So he was on the Rangers when they made it to their World Series and he pitched some pretty good games in at least the one against St. Louis. So he's been around that long and he's pitched at a very high level. I think most recently, I think he was in the White Sox bullpen. All right. Anyway, that's to set up who the people are who are talking here.
But my son, he won on Monday a game and lost.
He's explaining why he couldn't be there the day before because he couldn't find someone to take his son to this baseball tournament.
And after that, their bracket got put out and they were playing at noon yesterday. And by 9 p.m., I couldn't find another parent that was going to be able to take some of the kids that are in our area to the game. So I was like, well, I have to take off. I'd like for my son to play in these baseball games. And if they would have won at noon, which they didn't, so they were eliminated from the double elimination tournament / World Series, they would have played at 4 o'clock. And if they'd won at 4 o'clock, they would have played at 6 o'clock. And if they would have won at 6 o'clock, they would have played at 10 o'clock today. And if they would have won at 10 o'clock, they would have played at 2 o'clock. If they would have played at 2 o'clock, they would have played at 6 o'clock for the championship. So they would have played 6 games in 2 days.
Oh, man.
Plus,
is that good for?
I heard Chop explain this a little this morning. I was
okay, 6 games in 2 days. I'm thinking of a minor league team. How many starting pitchers do you have?
He talks a little bit. I don't know if it's in the portion you're going to say if it was earlier, but he talks a little bit about that these travel select teams will have like 5 kids. I say guys, 5 kids that are just pitchers.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, in the beginning of the segment, he was talking about that with Derek Holland, because Bassick said, when I first got into the majors, I was miserable because I was just a pitcher. And even all the way through college, he played position as well. And so he hated only playing baseball because he got into baseball because he likes the game. He hated having to only play every 5th day. And I mean, this is an adult who's gone through college and is now in the minors, and he's not having any fun because he's only pitching. And here you have, when do kids start pitching? Around 10 years old or so, 10 to 13 or 14-year-olds or 12 to 14-year-olds, something like that.
Kid pitches 9U.
So,
yeah.
So that young, and they're not really a baseball player already. They're only a pitcher. And some of these teams, he said, especially when you start to get into these bigger tournaments where you play so many games, they'll have 8 pitchers, and some of them will just be pitchers.
Yeah, well, even with the 5 pitchers, 6 games, you're having someone start twice in 2 days, or you're putting some rando in for a game.
Now it's not a full game because you're only playing usually like an hour or 75 minutes, something like that is usually your time limit on this age group.
Yeah, but you know how many pitches it takes a kid to get through an inning?
But how many pitches does it take a kid to get through an inning when you're still working on your control?
was like, man, that's a beating right there.
That's
So-
way too much.
For youth baseball, and I know they won't change this, it goes to renting fields and trying to get in as many games as possible to make as much money. Like the youth baseball is not for the benefit of the child. It's to make money. It's to make money off of
Now, pause
tournaments.
a
It's to make
second.
money off of the parent.
Well, there's actually
thi-
something he's going to say in this
Yeah.
rant that I wanted to touch on.
And this is so I've heard this before about too many games all year round, all this stuff. We've ranted about these things that they talk about here. And I think it's important because here you have a former player who also he helps coach that select team as well as other teams. So he helps coach his kids and other kids. And then you have a current player saying this is dumb and this is bad for the kids. So I think that part is important too, to hear not just randos on the internet, even though, like you said, you've
Yeah,
professionally
when
trained
it
a lot
comes
of
to healthy
pitchers.
shoulders, I'm not a rando.
Exactly. But then the part that really jumped out at me and said, "Oh, we need to play this and talk about it," is when he gets into the money. Because this is something I knew, but I didn't experience it at this level with my son, and so I didn't know the details of the money.
Parents, and it's really frustrating, and I know it's never going to change.
Really frustrating, and I know it's never going to change. That's where the parents need to stop signing their kids up.
Yes.
It can change. It's never going to change as long as you keep signing your kids up for it and pushing them through it. That's the only reason it's not changing.
Mhm.
This is boycott territory. We are destroying kids' shoulders and elbows, and realistically burning them out too. And the coaches are selling them a bad product, which we'll get into, and the people running the leagues, it's all about the money. You're selling your kid for money, basically, and they're playing on your love for your kid to give them an advantage, which they're not getting.
But when I was looking at this, there was a possibility if I would have just looked at yesterday. If yesterday they would have won 2 out of 3 games, they would have won the noon game and 4 o'clock game, and let's say lost the 6 o'clock game. So their tournament would have been over. That would have been their second loss in the double elimination tournament. They played 2 games on Friday, 2 games on Saturday. They had off on Sunday. Then they played 2 games on Monday. They ended up only playing 1 game on Tuesday, but could have played 3. That's 9 games in a 5-day stretch. And we're pitching kids that, I'll be honest, shouldn't have been pitching, because you would have never done what we done to Spores or to Will Smith or to Grant Anderson. You would have never done that to these adults playing in the major leagues. Now, I get it. It's not like a World Series tournament. You're playing 162. This is like end of the season. Season ended for my son Cal yesterday as they lost. But I was looking at it. If you're going to do these tournaments, why wouldn't you go 1 game on Monday, 1 game on Tuesday, 1 game on Wednesday, 1 game on Thursday? If we're going to really turn this into like we need to play every day, or
I'll tell you why. Because they would make less money. Because what parent can do that?
Exactly.
What parent can take their kid every day for 8 days straight or 9 days straight?
And he's going to get into the details of the money for the tournament sponsors, the people who put on the tournament. And he references this, but it's not just them. He mentioned renting a field. So it's the city or the private park that whoever's putting on the tournament has rented the field. Okay, well, the people who own the field don't want to stretch out a tournament that long either, because they would rather you have a weekend tournament and then they can have their, their city sports organization, the rec ball stuff, or have somebody else come in and do a tournament during the week, and then they get more money as well. So it's not just, I mean, he's going to hammer the people who put on the tournaments, but it's not just them.
Well, this is really telling because the people who run this are wrecking your kids to make money, and most of them knowingly. And the parents would change things if it inconvenience them, but they don't change things when it's wrecking their kids. Which goes against the whole thing. You know, go for the kids and parents will react. Well, we've got the reverse going on here because it's abstract. And people, I'm sorry, most people just do what they're told. And if the Little League coach says, this is going to give them an advantage over everybody else on their school team, so they're going to play better for their school team, and then they're going to be in the select league, and then they're going to have college scouts looking at them, and then they're going to go to the pros, and you're going to have a famous son. Yeah, 7.6 million kids in Little League, and what, 800 in the pros, counting minor leagues.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
It's not a lot. And I'm pretty sure this is one of those things that there is no control group now because everybody's doing it. There are very few kids that are just going and playing for the school team and ending up in the majors. Not because there's not kids talented enough to do that, but because the system is there.
Because you're told, oh no, if you're serious about baseball and you want to advance to the next level, this is what you have to do.
Well, and even coaches are fooled. I know school coaches that won't play the kids that didn't play fall ball, and that won't play the kids that didn't play summer select, no matter how good they are. I also know coaches that won't play the kids that parents didn't donate $5,000 to the booster. So, you know, again, follow the money.
Or get in 9 games. If you were to play one game every day, Monday through Friday, and then play 2 on Saturday and 2 on Sunday, that gives me 9 games in 7 days. That's still too much, but at least I pushed it out where
I'm gonna have fun here in my head, and I'm just gonna pretend that's a giant gallon jug of vodka lime. I don't know what that is, but it's not straight up water, and he's chugging it down.
Okay, yeah, it's probably got, like, you know, electrolyte whatever's in it. Put a pin in that because he talked about drinking and hydration earlier in the in this show, which runs from 10 to 2. So this is like a 4-hour show, and we're just looking at a segment here.
No, it's
which is something I want to talk about.
By the
this is their whole broadcast schedule, though.
Okay.
So this is their whole 12-hour broadcast schedule from like 6 to 6.
Oh, so it is different people at different times.
Yes. So this show is their midday, their 10 to 2 show. And Derek Holland is there on Wednesdays, so this was last Wednesday.
I can work a little bit more as a coach and not throw a kid, hey, I'm going to throw him 40 pitches on Monday. Then I'm going to throw him 20 pitches on Tuesday. Then I'm going to give him a day off on Wednesday and throw him 80 pitches on Tuesday. That is horrible for the arm. That is just, and I get it from a coaching standpoint.
Do we know what age the kids are that he's talking about? Because 80 pitches is a lot.
I think his kids, because he just at one point in this,
I've got the pitch count.
Show,
I've got the pitch count requirements on another tab. So
when do you get your permit? Like 15? Because one of his kids, he was razzing his kid and the schools that his kid didn't know how to sign his name because he'd never been taught and he'd never had to do it. And you have to sign your name for your driver's license for your permit.
Yeah, permit is 15 in Texas.
Yeah. So one of his kids is 15 and the other is like 13 or 14.
Okay.
Point, there's not much I can do. I don't have most teams.
Don't have a full team of pitchers.
Everybody doesn't pitch. Half the guys pitch.
Yeah.
And probably out of the half the guys that pitch, only 4 of them are maybe pretty good at it. The other 2 that I'm using on a 12-man team are like just in case guys. But now I'm having to really pitch them in these World Series things because we're just racking up game after game after game. Once you get to be over 14 years old, and you get to be 15 or.
Okay, add to that on a 12-man team, when the kid's not pitching, he's still playing. And usually they throw them on third base because you want the
Mm-hmm.
rocket arm to go from third to first.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's not like you're not throwing
That
hard when you're not pitching.
that was me. That was me and my cousin. That I would go to Houston and I would stay with them for the summer to play extra ball because their season started later. And so when I wasn't pitching, I was playing center or third. And when he wasn't pitching, he was catching, which doesn't throw as much, but that's still a long throw from home to second,
And it's all arm.
and it's all arm because
Yeah, the throw from home
yeah,
to second is not like a pitch where you're throwing from the
yeah,
ground up. You're
yeah,
popping up and chunking that with your arm.
yeah.
Yeah. These catchers, the good ones, have rocket arms without the benefit of the leg push.
Which is why a catcher who plays for a long time at catcher is pretty rare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got a kid who's pitcher catcher combination right now, and he's actually at Stanford with the coaches right now. He's a junior, I think, in high school, but they invited him up there, so
cool.
That's pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, but the point is, your shoulder's not getting a break.
Nope.
They're calling it a break because it's within the rules. But I mean, realistically, if we cared about the kids and we're going to have governing bodies, that kid cannot even play. He can pitch hit. He can pinch hit. That's it.
Yep.
For 16, you start carrying 20 guys on a select team because you'll have 5 guys that are pitcher onlys, which I don't like that either.
Really?
Because now I just don't.
You're limiting kids at a young age.
Derek, I'd love to know this. I was miserable my first 2 years in professional baseball because I was a pitcher only. I hated playing only every 5th day. It was just miserable to me that you were only playing every 5th day.
This is one thing I don't like, though. I lost the fun of it. The real great pitchers out there are like, they enjoy the fact that they get 5 days rest because they treat it like a job.
Well, I think Holland is going to get into that a little bit. Of part of Basic's problem was all the way through college, he still played a position, and Derek Holland talks about how, oh well, in college he was already done with that, so he had already gotten used to it.
Yeah, and
but,
this is the thing. When you're talking about getting to the pros, you're talking about being great. There's you're losing the jack of all trades, master of none mentality.
Yes.
And if you're a starting pitcher in the pros, you have to be so good every 5 days. And it's a job. So you pitch day 1. And sometimes you start right after the game, but sometimes you start the next day. You do your hardest workout. Then you do a moderate workout. Then you do a light workout. And you throw a bullpen on that light day. And then you have a day of rest. And then you have your next game. But that's and all the while in that, you've got hours of film study on your next opponent because you know who it is, because you know when you're pitching next. And
I think it was kind of fortuitous when I jumped in the car to go to my man touching appointment this afternoon. He was actually talking on a similar vein, and he was telling a story about early on in his career when he had just been called up, and he was kind of, I think this was when he was with the Indians, and he am I allowed to say that anymore?
No, what are they now again?
The Guardians. It's stupid. Bring back Chief Wahoo, you jerks. Anywho, he was told straight up by his pitching coach, look, if you don't do better, your next start coming up is going to determine whether or not we're able to keep you on the roster or we send you back down. And so he kind of just went out driving around to try and get his head right, and he just happened upon a Little League game. And he just sat there, parked in the outfield, watching this Little League game for 2 innings, thinking about why he got into the sport in the first place and how much he loved the game. And that helped kind of rejuvenate him and give him, a kind of mental psychological edge for his next start to pitch well enough to be able to stay up in the majors instead of being sent back down.
Don't get me wrong.
Game for a reason.
People take me the wrong way when I say that. It's not that you don't find meaning in the game. It's not like that you don't love the game. It's that you have to understand that loving the game isn't about having fun every single second.
Yes. So
it's being a master of your craft.
This is something Mike Rowe talked about, like way back when he first started doing Dirty Job, like the first few seasons into Dirty Jobs, when he kind of had this epiphany of, I'm paraphrasing the way he explains it is, you know, people say do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Well, that's silly because not everyone can do what they love. It's don't do what you're passionate about. Take your passion with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, not only that, I always say it's not don't do what you love. You'll never work a day in your life. It's if you do what you love, you're going to end up working your ass off because you want to do a great job at it.
Yes, exactly.
And that's that you can take both of those. There's also the mentality of do what pays the bills and then do what you love on the side.
And,
There's all kinds of ways to enjoy life.
and to this particular subject, if you want kids to fall in love with the game and stay in love with the game, if you're a parent, it's because you like this game, you enjoy this. If you think your kid has a shot at playing at the next level, it's because they like the game enough to put in the work, to your point. If you are part of the organization, whether it's Major League Baseball or any of the others on down, you want kids to fall in love with the game and stay in love with the game because that becomes your fan base. That is your revenue stream. That's not going to happen if you grind them down, if you put them in a slog.
Yeah, and I'm speaking to adults now because he was talking about as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm speaking to adults now. With the kids, yes, I want them to play all the positions. You don't want to lock them into something. First of all, we don't know if he's going to be 6'2", right? So you don't want to lock them into being just a pitcher right away when they may have skills elsewhere and they may enjoy another position better and they will put in the work, like you said, to be better at that other position. They may be a great hitter as well as a good pitcher. In fact, a lot of times you're selecting out the great athletes in the beginning because the great athlete's going to be the early good pitcher anyways.
Yes.
So yes, at the young age, I have a completely different, I think you should be all over the place, finding where your niche is, how your body grows. Also, you're going to be less apt to repetitive stress injuries like we're going to talk about because you're moving all around. And I will extend this to multi-sports, not just positions within the sports. You remember 10th grade when we both moved back to Lavernia? What position did they put me at in football?
Middle linebacker.
No, they didn't put me at middle linebacker.
Oh, you were on the offensive line.
Offensive line and defensive line. How big was I?
Yep. Not much. Well,
5'9", 135 pounds.
Yeah, not much shorter, but a lot less muscular.
And see, when I left Lavernia in the 8th grade, I was 5'9", 125 pounds. I grew taller earlier than most kids. So I was the center on the basketball team and I was a lineman in football.
Yep.
But when I came back, they just plugged me right back in when I left. But when I was in Rockport, I was a middle linebacker. I had to actually convince Coach Blackburn after 2 middle linebacker injuries to let me try to play middle linebacker. And oh my gosh, I was starting.
I had the exact same experience, and it took me a while to realize, for it to dawn on me, because I was gone for 3 years, that wait a minute, because remember at the end of 6th grade PE, Coach Gonzalez brings us all out and we're doing football as the last kind of component of our 6th grade PE. And it's just a coincidence that he's one of the football coaches and we're about to go into football the next year. And he lined us all up where he foresaw us playing the next year, which was silly at that time because between
not a single boy there had hit a growth spurt. That's
not a single boy. Between 6th and 7th grade, you're going to start hitting your growth spurts. I hit mine between 7th and 8th, and I grew so much that I had a similar circumstance that I was playing defensive end in 8th grade because I was so much bigger than everyone else. Well, 9th grade, I played quarterback and safety because I had sprouted up, but I didn't add on any muscle, and everybody else grew by that point as well. So I wasn't big enough to keep playing on the line. Well, I go back to Lavernia and I was like, why are they putting me here? They had me at outside linebacker, but it was a defensive end because I was down on the line. They had me playing that, and then everybody played both ways. They had me at that and tight end. Well, Tony, who was like college sized in high school, was playing ahead of me, and I knew I was never going to play ahead of him because he was one of the few natural athletes on the team. There's no way they're taking him
I
out.
still contest he wasn't most athletic in our high school, though.
No.
There's a guy everybody forgets about
Boo boo.
because he didn't play football.
I thought you were going to talk about Boo.
No, Dennis Cervenka. He was
Mhm.
drafted, I believe, by the Cubs out of high school.
Yes.
But he was a
Yes.
quarterback up until 9th grade because he decided to play baseball and basketball because he didn't want to get hurt playing football.
Yep.
And because he didn't play football, everybody forgot about him, but he was the most athletic person
So
in our high school.
The moral of the story here is the adults, the parents, the coaches get locked in on this tunnel vision and they can't break it. I was gone for 3 years. I came back a completely different person. In elementary school, I was a little butterball. So sure, it made sense to put me on the offensive and defensive line relative to size of how I was compared to everyone else. When I came back, I was a beanpole. I was about 5'10". I was almost as tall as I am now, and I weighed about 135, 140 pounds. Why am I on the line? It made absolutely no sense. But parents and coaches get locked in on this tunnel vision of, no, this is the way it's supposed to be.
Well, and not only does it not only does it not let the child explore and pique their interest, but if you look at different sports, pitching versus position, we'll stick to baseball for now.
Mhm.
The movement skills are different.
Oh, yeah.
Do you need to work on drop step crossover runs if you're pitching? Probably not. Because if you're doing a crossover run while you're pitching, then something really went wrong with that play. So the movement skills are different. So say you're pitching, but then you only grow to 5'7" or 5'8". Well, now you don't have the movement skills to switch to a position because these other kids have been playing it for another 3 years on top of you, and now you're 3 years behind. And just like any real skill, development matters. And
Bartolo Colon, that's the name I was trying to think of.
Bartolo Colon.
Yeah, you don't need a crossover because you can just be a giant round Mexican guy and deflect line drives off your beer belly and then just pick up the ball.
Oh, that's not when you would use a crossover run, but
it worked.
Oh, okay. So back to the video. But yeah, don't lock your kids in early, and especially like they're talking about it when it's for stupid reasons, like you need to play 9 games in 5 days.
Hey, when I felt like I was a baseball player and now I had to turn into an every 5th day pitcher.
I was okay with it just because when I was in college, I played outfield a little bit and then it was immediately shut down, became just pitcher only. So I was used to it. So it didn't bother me. But speaking of the kids though, like I want to make this clear too is, have you ever seen a pro game? Three pro games in one day? Okay, so kids should definitely be doing that. That sounds right. And then on top of it, like you're burning these kids out. You want them to want to play sports and stuff or play baseball. You can't do that. You cannot play 6 games in, what'd you say, 2 days?
Yeah.
Like you can't do that. We need to be more responsible with these kids. Like we're killing the game of like I get it. We're trying to promote the game of baseball. That's not doing it. Playing 6 games and then you got guys that never pitch or even probably want to pitch. You got to make them pitch. It's just not.
Well, promoting the game of baseball seems like a pretty lame excuse when the kids are always playing. They're not watching baseball. They're losing sight of their heroes in baseball because they're out there playing while there's still 162 games going on in the pros. Or they want to watch a game on a Sunday afternoon, but they got batting practice because their parents are putting money into it. And yeah.
Not a good thing to do for kids at all, I think.
Can I ask a question about this?
Sure.
'Cause my kid plays, 3 times a week. Right. And he's an outfielder. We have 3 pitchers. We're okay. But what's the goal for having your kids play this frequently? Are you trying to get them seen? Or are you just trying to get them reps? I'm trying to figure out.
Money.
It's money from the tournaments, right?
So think about this. I've done this before. I've said this on the air. Now, there was not a gate fee at this. We all had to pay like a gate fee before the tournament so they wouldn't have to take money.
Okay. I hadn't thought about that because he's about to go into the details of the money, which I talked about earlier, which is really important here and really eye-opening. But to
Yeah,
brain
and let
farting on his name.
after your little rant here, let's get through that, and then we'll go to the stuff I have because
Okay, I think it's Kevin.
yeah.
So the radio guy, his point is a great point because he's coming at it from the I'm just the overweight, out of shape parent here with a kid playing rec ball. And but that's how it's sold. It's sold as, oh, you want to make it to the next level. You need reps. You need to be seen by these other select coaches. You need to be seen by high school coaches who may come out and watch. And then if you're in high school and you're playing summer or fall select travel team baseball, there will be scouts that might come around and see you. That's how it's sold. But to Basic's point, that's not what it's about. That's not the point.
Well, and as far as being seen, every pro guy that I've ever worked with and every actual coach that I've ever worked with, not the little league coaches or the hardball academy or any of those kind of league coaches, they'll say right straight up, the scouts already know who's good.
Mm-hmm.
They already know where to go and who to look at, and it's not about those. It's not the show. Every once in a while, someone breaks through at a showcase,
yes,
but realistically, they already know who to look for, and if they go to a showcase, it's because one of those kids is there.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that gives your kid a chance to piggyback on another kid's success if they haven't been seen. But for the most part, baseball is so prevalent nowadays. Even little towns have enough exposure that the scouts will know who you are. Yep. Now, I understand there are places that have more exposure than others, but even still, those places are probably low-income places where they're not going to be able to afford all this anyways.
Yep.
And that's where JUCO comes in.
Yep.
Yeah.
But if me and my wife want to go see our kids play baseball, it's $20 a day to watch them play baseball because there's a gate fee at all these tournaments. Now, if you take 12 kids on a team, there's going to be more people that go. Grandparents are going to go. Brothers and sisters are going to go. But if you just say 25 people are going to watch your team play on a Saturday, that is times 10. That's easy, right? $250. Well, you're going to do that again on Sunday. Mm-hmm. So that's $500 per team. And I'm being really generously low on that. That's just gate fee. The teams already had to pay $500 to play in the tournament. So if there's 10 teams playing at a certain age group in a tournament, which is a little bit of a low number, but just trying to do easy math here, that's $5,000 for the tournament to happen for, let's just say 10-year-olds. Okay, so I've already collected $5,000. Now there's going to be a gate fee for those 10 teams. Those 10 teams are now each going to pay, this is a low number, but $500 each. Now I've collected another $5,000. That's $10,000 for just 10-year-old teams to play. In these tournaments, you have 7U, 8U, 9U, 10U, 11U, 12U, 13U. Usually there's 7 different age groups playing in a tournament. So now take that
70 grand?
70 grand in a weekend for these tournaments. So for Perfect Game or for whatever it is for the other ones that are around, Perfect Game's taking over, and hey, good for them. They're taking over. But just think about that. These tournaments on a weekend that are happening around our Metroplex, they're making $70K a week. And now they do have to pay umpires. Umpires get paid, which is a pretty good paying job if you look at it on a per hour basis. It's about $50 an hour.
Yeah.
So if you umpire 4 games, you're looking at, $300 approximately that you're going to get to umpire 3 games. So they do have to pay umpires. You do have to pay the field to rent, which isn't that big of a cost. But when you just start looking at this, guys, like this is why it's not beneficial to the kids at all. This is when you are part of this scheme, I will say, or part of this program, you're raking in $50K to $100K a weekend for this. And who cares about the kids? Honestly, 99% of them are never going to even play college baseball.
So in this, it gets like the dads the parents get competitive with it too. So hey, we got to get you there. We got to make sure.
Yeah, that is the part that's important because they're not seeing the injury risk and they're not seeing the money grab. They're seeing the inkling of an advantage they can give their kid.
This is where it's kind of funny and sad and frustrating that Bassett gets it, but he doesn't get it. Because as you stopped to point out at the very beginning of this, when we first started watching this, is he said it's never going to change. Well, it's never going to change because people won't change it. He gets it. He understands the scam. He understands the literal danger to the kids. And yet he's still participating in it. And it's because of what he's about to say right here.
Well, I just he talked about the dads, the competitive dads. I'm thinking the vicarious dads too, because how many of those dads saying, if I had had this, I would have been a pro. Because this machine wasn't around when they were kids.
And I want to go deeper into that a little bit later. But first, listen to his listen to the way he makes it personal.
We're there for all these things, and
I'll be honest, I've already said
left
this.
behind.
In the next 4 to 5 years, I'm going to pay for my kids to play select baseball. I am going to pay approximately $50,000 total for 2 kids to play baseball for kind of 7th grade through 12th grade. Approximately, it's going to cost me $50,000 for them to play baseball
each.
Yeah, no, total.
Okay.
About $25K a kid to play through about high school, because you're going to travel if.
Whoops, sorry.
So about $5,000 a year for like 8th to 12th grade
kind of high school career.
Okay, so I wrote rich kid game. So here's the great thing about this. We've been harping all day about how it's not really that great of an advantage to go through this whole system. If it was, it would be systemic racism, my friends.
That's a good point. Just out of curiosity, percentage of MLB players from Latin America.
You could just say Dominican Republic.
You know what? That's better. That is actually better because it's even nearer. From Dominican. How many MLB players from Dominican Republic? From an April 2022 article, 99 players. And that's in the show. They're not even talking about total. They're not talking about the major leagues. And it's a 20-something man roster per team. And 99 of them are from one very poor Latin American country.
So almost 4 whole teams worth. Yeah. And do they have all this money?
Good gosh, no.
No. Now I will say they're out there with a stick hitting a rock, but
that's the beauty of baseball. That's why it became America's pastime, because in all of these rural and small towns, anyone could play it. All you needed was a little bit of space, a stick, and a ball.
Well, let's look at another sport. And why is it the avenue for so many inner city kids to get out of where they're at is basketball? You put up an egg crate and you have a ball. One kid out of the 10 that shows up was able to get a ball, and they all show up. All right, how much more of this is on there?
Just a couple minutes.
Is that every year?
Right. Every year. You're going to need a couple gloves. If they're playing infield and outfield, that's 2 different gloves. You can't use the same glove at those positions. You might even need a pitcher's glove. Right?
Pause it again. You might. Let's actually, we can take a break and stop it here and go into other stuff, because he's going to break down where that number comes from. And you've already heard some of it, of gate fees and tournament fees. And when you're on that team, you're going to have to pitch in. You're going to have to pay your part of that tournament fee. And you would have had to pay a fee just to get on the select team in the first place. And then any tournaments that are outside of the regular schedule, there's going to be on top of that. No, you don't. I played for a long time with a single glove. Now, I knew kids who had a first baseman's glove, but you don't really need one until you start to get into high school and kids start to throw really hard.
Yeah, when Ben was playing, of course, it's 9U, but it was, you had the catcher's glove and then everybody else.
Exactly. And he's going through now in the majors. This is true. You have a first baseman's glove, a catcher's glove, a pitchers wear a completely different glove. Infielders other than first baseman wear a different glove, and then outfielders wear a different glove. You have 5 different gloves on the field. You don't need that. even if you're playing at a high level as
Well,
a
but
kid, you
again, you
don't
said
need that.
in the majors where they're already locked in their position.
Exactly.
So you don't have a guy who's going to pitch one day, play first base another day, play second base and short dot stop a different day, or catch another day. So
Yep. And that's part of the cost he's talking about there is, oh, my kid's a pitcher, so I need to get him a pitcher's glove, but he's not pitching every day. So when he's not pitching, he's playing third base because he's resting. So I need to give him an infielder's glove. No, you don't. You don't. And you don't need a new bat every year unless you're outgrowing it, which, yeah, like in middle school, I had a new bat every year, but that's because I was hitting growth spurts and I needed a bigger
and
bat.
guess what? You get on Facebook, your hometown moms and dads, and say, "Hey, my son just outgrew his bat. Who needs this one? And who has a spare this size?"
Mm-hmm.
And all these parents are trading
Mm-hmm.
these things around.
It's so to the point I was making earlier is it's sad and frustrating and funny in a dark comedy kind of way of you can tell he gets it from the stuff he's saying, and yet he's still participating in the system. He should be one of those people saying, look, and to his credit, he does a little bit later. But we'll go into that more of no, I'm not going to participate in this. You should be saying that more. Just we've talked about this, and this
Well,
is
no,
where it
you
kind of
should be
spills over to
actioning it more.
politics. Exactly. Well,
Yeah, he's saying it here, which is something because he's on a radio show and they've got
yes,
an audience.
but
it's not a big YouTube audience, but I'm sure the radio show is whatever the bandwidth of that is.
they're the biggest sports talk and one of the biggest radio stations in the DFW metro, which is a big metro area.
So it's actually specific to the people who would be needing to hear it. So
standing up and saying no and standing by it, not backing down, to me, that is an action, and an action that needs to be taken more. And this is where it kind of spills over into not just sports. You know, this isn't just sports because we're talking about youth development. We're talking about childhood development here.
Which makes me wonder about, because this is one of those, just I said, there's spillover from the politics, right? In private, I've talked to so many of these professional players that I've helped develop over the years, and every single one of them say the same thing, that it's just a farce and that none of that's going to help, and there's a proper way of doing it, but they never do say anything. But they're also sponsored by Nike, they're also sponsored by Under Armour, they're sponsored by Perfect Pitch, they're on the side when they want to make extra money, they're doing pitching lessons for these 9 and 10 and 11-year-olds. So yeah, there's a little bit of integrity issue there, I think. But yeah, there's the truth, and then there's what you're told. And what's at the bottom of it? Well, I can't say that or I'm going to lose XYZ.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, let's pause there a second, and then because I'm old and need to go to the bathroom, and then we'll go into the numbers and details that you have.
The nerdy stuff behind all this.
All right, so you have some nerdy numbers to go along with what we're ranting about here, and then I have some anecdotes which kind of give a personal reinforcement to what you're going to talk about here.
All right, well, let's start with the pro argument here. Of course, by a youth baseball organization. Benefits baseball year-round. Blah, blah, blah. Stories about how winter gets boring. America's the greatest pastime. I know you think I'm a commie because I don't think that's true. Drinking beer is a great pastime.
I like the way Whitlock phrases it, is that America is or was baseball's pastime, but football has become its passion.
You mean baseball was America's pastime?
Baseball was America's pastime.
America was not baseball's pastime.
You know what? I got a headache and my neck hurts, and I'm imbibing muscle relaxers to try and help me feel better.
So sports allow them to relieve all the tensions from the day. Getting involved, youth baseball, joining teams and leagues, youth athletes can receive direct and proper training and coaches, instructors. So there's a benefit, right?
That's all true so far.
Yep. By joining a school team or playing in a league, youth baseball players will learn the key fundamentals.
Oh, wait, now we've taken a leap. Now we've taken a logical leap. Because yes, all the things you were saying there, but now you've done this slight little youth baseball play. Well, wait a minute. Everything you said beforehand was true. Why does it has to be baseball?
Yeah, develop organizational and motor skills, develop the minds of youth, physical and mental level, and also gives an individual determination and drive for a goal. Harness focus and induces problem-solving ability. Getting involved in sports builds relationships. Yes, keyword in sports. Doesn't necessarily say baseball, right?
Yep.
Supplies individuals with the environment of 15 or so players in a team. So yes, team, working together, all of those things. Friendships, yet which could also be there if you're not playing baseball. In fact, I've seen Ben have the problem where we didn't do year round with him, but his friends were playing year round, so he couldn't play with them during those other times
Because they were busy. They
because they were
had
busy.
team
Yeah.
practice. They had maybe private coaching practice. They had whatever. And then because of all that practice, that means that they've got a very narrow window to get their schoolwork done in. So they're always busy.
Here's my favorite paragraph here. One of the most major benefits of playing baseball or any sport in general is to stay physically fit and active. The Center for Disease Control reported that the obesity problem for youth generation tripled from the mid-1970s to 2000s. Getting involved in the diamond will certainly provide that benefit for youngsters, especially for a generation where technology seems to take up much of their time. Okay, so let's look at the sport of baseball, especially with youth baseball. Getting out on the field, sitting in the outfield, picking your nose, maybe catching one or two pop flies, or maybe not catching one or two pop flies that come your way, throwing one here, taking 3 or 4 swings of a bat, maybe running some bases, but most of the time spent in the dugout, drinking 4 Gatorades in the process because we live in Houston, and then having a pizza on the way home. That's a weight gaining event.
Yeah.
And it wasn't word for word, but I stole that from Martin Rooney. He says it a little bit better. But
Well,
Martin,
this is why even as a kid, I liked practice more than the games, because as much as I loved and then re-loved baseball, it is a very random sport. There's not a lot of
well, as you and your brother used to always say to me, it's a sport of anticipation.
exactly.
You don't lose a whole lot of weight anticipating.
Exactly.
But
In
this is
practice, you're
actually
actually
why my
doing
son stopped
things.
playing. My
Yeah.
son played 9 and then 10U right before COVID. Or he was in 10U was during COVID. He played 9U and then COVID hit, and then he played 10U. Well, what was the difference between pre and post COVID? Practice. All they would do would be to get together for the games.
Yep.
During the COVID, just slightly post lockdown period. First of all, they're all sitting in the dugout together. If you want to
What's
talk
the
about
point of
COVID,
that?
yeah.
So
But he stopped having practice, and he liked playing when he could go out there and hit balls off the tee and throw with his friends and run around the bases and all these things you don't get to do if you're not very good at it.
and when I was a kid, I had good coaches. Man, I wish I could remember the names of some of them, but my dad, Keith Johansson, these were guys that had grown up loving and playing baseball, and they were really good coaches, and they made practices fun. My uncle Jimmy, they made practices fun. They had lots of different drills we could do, so it was never the same. There was a variety there, and we were always moving. So not just for the fun aspect, but for what this is talking about, that was something I tried to do when I coached, and something I noticed when I wasn't the coach is there wasn't a lot of moving. There was a lot of regimented, all right, we're gonna do PP now. So you're either standing around waiting for your turn, or you're doing the tee, or you're doing soft toss, or you're taking some practice pitches. We never did that when I was a kid, because we always mixed in the batting practice with the fielding practice. So it's like you've got 3 or 4 kids over there doing the tee and the soft toss and waiting on deck to go up to bat. Everyone else is out in the field, either doing drills or fielding the ball of that batting practice. It was never what it is now.
Well, and even as a parent, it was more fun then, because when you're just having your kids drill all over the place, there was a role for the parents that weren't the coaches.
Yes.
Because I could be out there shagging balls, or I could be out there. I did the warm up for him because I'm a strength coach, and I ended up being in I wasn't one of the coaches, but I was one of the coaches. I'd go out there and warm them up for 10 minutes. Or when they were in between stuff, I was teaching them skips, and I was teaching them, these little things, or having them do, little agility drills. So it was, the practices where all the action was, but the game itself, I mean, it's a weight gaining event. It really is.
It is a game of anticipation. If you
Yeah.
watch Ken Burns's baseball, there's a lot of issues with it historically, but the personalities on it are really good because you have people that genuinely love the game of baseball, and when they explain why, it's really impactful on an emotional and psychological level.
All right. So one of the more rewarding aspects about competing through the less warmer months of the year is training and development for potential success next spring. So play yourself into shape, right? So no more glum feelings and long stares at the seemingly empty field. There's the ball to be played. Batter up.
All right. So
What's this guy's expertise? Oh, where's the
good
author?
question.
It doesn't even list the
question.
author.
Well, it's because it's, I don't know, maybe it was a marketing person that.
I don't know.
All right. All right.
But, okay. So that there's your youth one sports.
All right. So pause there a second because I want to rant about something that we've talked about before, and I'm sure you were going to talk about, but that Derek Holland and Mike Bassett go into in more detail on that clip. Either before or right after. So Bassick makes the point that he had some parents on him last year, and he was anticipating it was going to happen again this year, because as much as he buys into the system that he doesn't like, he does have his limits, and one of them is he doesn't play fall ball, winter ball with his kids. No, they need a break. They want a break. There are other sports that they like, specifically basketball. Bassick was this is a point we're going to make later, is that how much does it matter is he may not look like it looking at the middle-aged bald guy, but he was a high school star. He was a two-sport varsity athlete, basketball and baseball. And so his kids also play baseball. He's a big baseball fan. So when he's on the radio show, he talks a lot about the Mavericks because he's a big baseball fan, because he probably could have played JUCO basketball somewhere, but he was a better baseball player. Derek Holland says the same thing, and he is a generation later. He graduated high school in 2005, I think it was. But he had a very similar experience, and one of those experiences was, no, we played other sports, man. We didn't have this year-round baseball thing. Here you have someone who has pitched in at least one, if not two, World Series in Derek Holland. He played other sports. If you want to keep your kids in shape, if you want to teach them good physical skills, as much as I'm not a basketball fan, there's a lot of good footwork and coordination there to be learned. And it keeps you inside in the colder months and lets you do something. So both of them talk about this of, oh no, my kids are going to play basketball. It's all right. They need a break from baseball. They need to do something else. They need to learn different physical skills.
So this next article I have up goes into what you just talked about, but because you were talking about it, I skipped ahead to the numbers. And I wish I could get this advertisement to go away, but there's no X that I can see.
That's obnoxious.
Yeah. There it
Yay.
left. Yay, huzzah. It's only to be replaced by a new one. There we go. All right. So 299 NCAA baseball programs. They hand out 11.7 scholarships each for a roster of 25 kids. Baseball coaches cut and chop up partial scholarships. So potentially a family could spend $40,000 on youth baseball, and the player nets a $10,000 a year scholarship in return. So that's the best case. So best case, you break even.
Mm-hmm.
Per the NCAA, the advertisement came back. Damn it. It keeps covering up. I wish they would at least put it in the corner.
Yes.
Yeah. Per the we're at the bottom here, so I can read the whole thing. Per the NCAA, about 5.6% of boys who play high school baseball as seniors will play college ball. That does not include junior colleges, which is kind of important because actually there are some
Yes.
JUCOs that are preferred spots for people who were going to be drafted high, but want a higher draft position. Because once you commit to an
Yes.
NCAA team, you're committed for what, 2 years?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
if
can't
you
I
go to
can't
a
keep
JUCO,
straight between football, baseball, and basketball. I can't keep straight the rules, but
yeah,
yeah.
if you go JUCO, you're eligible every year. So I've actually had a few
Okay.
players go that route. So
Now, it's even worse than that though, because there are programs, there are post-high school programs. This was one of my early um box gym uh uh people that I worked with, that they had, the box gym I was working at had done a deal, and I can't remember the name of the place. Around here, there is this program for post high school students who either didn't make or want to improve their position in making a college program. So it was basically a baseball tech school is the way I phrased it. And the kid I was talking to, who was the main one that I worked with out of this group, was a catcher, and he said, "Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Is it's like going to a trade school, a tech school for baseball. That's money that they're paying in, or their parents, because they don't have a job. That's money that they're paying in the hopes that they can make a JUCO and then make a college, or make it into, a college scholarship, so that they can continue to play on to the next level. And that's just added cost, man.
yeah,
And it
so
ain't cheap.
by those numbers, about 0.5% of those high school seniors that start in high school. So that's key too, because we're talking about Little League, right? That start in high school will be drafted by a big league team. That's just to be drafted. Remember how many rounds there are of the draft and
Of
how
the
many of those,
baseball draft, yeah,
yeah, the
there's a
baseball
gazillion.
draft. Yeah, there's a gazillion. And realistically, the first 10, you're kind of like you're set to become a major leaguer someday. You're set unless you screw up.
Yes.
But then the next 1,000 people that are drafted after that, how many of those even see a minor league
hmm
even starting session? So it's that, and if you're not in the first 10 rounds, your signing bonus isn't going to be enough that you're not still living off your parents to play in the minor leagues.
Yeah, I like that sentence there at the bottom. In short, the odds are horrendous, and yet the money pours into the point where youth baseball in America, youth is a multi-billion dollar, not baseball as a whole, but just youth baseball,
Mm-hmm.
multi-billion
And
dollar
yeah, and so
industry.
we're these numbers are based on high school seniors that play. So actual playing high school seniors that made the team. And I would say probably you would have to even narrow that down to who started on their team.
Yes.
And then how many little leaguers per high school players are there per town, per city? It's probably 10 to 1 at least.
All right. What was our graduating class? 90 something?
I think we
Or had
just
we
broke
broken
100.
100? We just broke
I think
100.
it was like
Okay.
101.
And when we were kids, when we were in elementary school playing Little League, I feel like there were 8 to 10 teams in our age group. Something like that. So that's quite a bit for a very small town. Because that was just for our age group. And then you've got that for every age group.
Mm-hmm.
And a little more on the lower end, because more kids are going to get into it just to see if they like it, and then they're going to, I don't want to do this anymore, kind of thing.
Yeah. So there's two messages there. First of all, your odds are very small.
Mm-hmm.
But the other message for the pros that I always tell my guys that want to kind of coast after they made it
Yes.
is there's always someone else coming.
Oh yeah.
There are plenty of people coming.
And not just this small percentage of high school seniors, but as we just talked about, that Dominican kid who's got a stick and a rock.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Jared's best years were in Miami because he got traded for a shit ton of prospects from the Astros, which actually paid off for them because then they won the championship a few years later with those prospects. But that's the message there. It was what I was telling them before that. There's always people coming after you. the team will put a lot of money into a bunch of prospects because then they have a lot of people to select from.
So
And yes, you were balling, but you were worth a lot, so they got the prospects out of you. And now there's a bunch of prospects coming for your spot in Miami too. And then he started balling there.
all right, so exit out of this for a second, because that's a perfect segue into one of the things I wanted to talk about, which was, so one of the reasons my dad has long said that he loves baseball is because, I'm paraphrasing here, but as he put it, it is the only sport where you can work your way into it. Because it's so much about skill that if you practice and practice and practice, you don't have to be a natural athlete, and you can make it into a high level, if not the majors. And the more I've thought about it, the more I've thought not that he was wrong, but that he wasn't completely right. And there's some good examples of this. And you just brought up Jared, and we were talking the other day after we were done recording last week, and I mentioned this, and you'd said, and this was news to me and pretty eye-opening to me, is that Jared didn't start playing baseball till he was in 8th grade.
Not really, not with any
Seriously.
intensity. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is someone who played in the majors for 8 years, 6 years.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how many years he was in the minors. I started with him in 14, and that was the year after he was called up. So, well, I started with him as his head coach. I was assistant to him when he was younger. So 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. How many years? 2 years. 1 year with the Astros, 2 years with the Marlins, 3 with the Padres, 2 or 3 with the Padres. So 5 to 6 years. Yeah.
Okay.
And that doesn't count the 4 or 5 years he was in the minors.
And all right, and we were just watching Derek Holland, who played at least a decade in the majors and is still playing professionally, even if it's minor league, at 36 years old. And he was the same way as, I didn't start focusing on baseball until I was in high school, because I played sports year round, and it was a different sport every season. So these are people, and we've talked about this. There is a degree of genetics here. There is a natural athleticism of, if you are a natural athlete and you put the work into it. And I've got a personal story that kind of talks about how my dad wasn't completely right here in his oldest brother. So my dad was telling me about how him and his, next oldest brother were sitting around talking about the eldest, Uncle John, with a friend from the small town area, rural area where they grew up. And the guy, the friend was talking about how my Uncle John was the best baseball player he ever saw play live. Not the best baseball player ever, obviously, but the best one he ever saw live. He only played in a small college that would, at the time, be like a JUCO. It was a 4-year university that he graduated from, Panhandle State. I think it's called Northwestern State now, Oklahoma. And he played baseball. I think he played all 4 years before he graduated from, and he was in RCC, so he got a commission and went on to the Army and served a couple of tours in Nam. And I didn't know all this, because when I was talking to him, my interest was history and military history. So I talked to him a lot about his service, and he told me more than he even told my dad, and especially his mom. He never talked about it with his mom. Is this going to go along with? Yep. I think I've talked about this guy before. One of the guys on that radio station he was with the Packers when they won their Super Bowl in the 90s. He was with the Cowboys for a while. He's a former scout. And he said he always loved when he was going out looking and recruiting for college. His dad was with Bear Bryant, I think, is how far back he goes. So when his dad, and then when he was going out recruiting for college, and then again, even into the pros, he loved to meet linebackers and linemen who wrestled at a high level.
Okay, well, let me add context to this, because this is where it gets a little abstract. The person who wrote that article was one of my semi-mentor. I only met him a couple times, but the system I learned under at Velocity was his system. And that's Lauren Seagrave, who is one of the most famous track and field coaches in the country. And he talks about wrestling for inline sprinters.
That is completely different from leverage and the swim move and that kind of thing is what Brian Broaddus, this guy, what he was talking
No, he's
about.
talking about balance and coordination.
But you don't think about, oh, well, you're just running. Well, it's not that simple.
Yeah, but if you have side-to-side movement or you stray on the track, every little bit of straying is milliseconds off of your 100-meter dash time.
Once I stopped being a fatty, I was actually pretty fast, and it wasn't because I'm naturally fast. It was because I accidentally had really good form. And I didn't know it until someone who knew what they were talking about pointed it out. And that is that kind of goes along with what I'm talking about here, because I think I mentioned this a couple episodes ago where I accidentally went down this rabbit hole on Larry Bird. And because he was so good and because he was such an icon, you don't realize how he compared to other people. If you watch, especially people of the era talk about him, they all laugh and talk about how unathletic he was, which is weird because from our position looking at him, if you accidentally met Larry Bird today, you'd go, holy crap, you're huge. And if you look at him next to normal people at the time, he was a big, strong, athletic guy. But for a professional basketball player, he wasn't that fast. He wasn't that coordinated. He wasn't that quick, but he was so smart, basketball smart, that he could use what skills he had and make them better. And that was kind of the point I was getting at, is you could be someone like Larry Bird where you're not the natural athlete of a Magic Johnson, who was an incredibly athletic individual who then learned how to be an incredibly good basketball player. And Larry Bird kind of did it the other way around, is he was good enough athletically to play at a high level, but then he made himself. Tom Brady's another example. Guy was drafted in the 7th round, and he made himself better. He took what athletic physical skills he did have and made it better. So back to my story, is this kind of was an epiphany I had thinking about what we're going to talk about today is, and it just kind of dawned on me of, yeah, baseball is very skill oriented and you can train yourself into that next level, but you have to have a baseline. And my Uncle John, so for context, the guy they were talking to, his son has 2 World Series rings as a pitcher for the Marlins and the Cardinals. Looper is the last name. Braden, I think, is the son's name. So this guy knows baseball. And my Uncle Lewis was, oh, he wasn't that good. And Mr. Looper kind of went into it of no, of how good my Uncle John was. And then it kind of dawned on me the other day. And my dad told me this months ago. And it just kind of out of the blue hit me. My Uncle John went through Ranger School. And I've talked about this a little bit before in ranting about women in Rangers a little bit anyway. Before I'd learned how about Uncle John going through Ranger School, I had talked to one of my dad's subordinates, a captain who had gone through Ranger School when he was 30. And he said he was way too damn old at 30 because of how physically taxing it is. And then I listened to my Uncle John talk about it, and it was even worse back in the 60s. They purposefully starve you. They give you just enough food to function. They give you just enough sleep to function. But somewhere I've got it's called a blouse, the BDU blouse that he had when he graduated Ranger School. It wouldn't fit me back then when I was 145, 150 pounds. It wouldn't fit me. And Uncle John's a little bit taller than me. That's how physically taxing it is. And yet he made it through. That says something about him physically, genetically. That,
well, it's the old Jackie Robinson. Baseball was my 5th best sport.
Right? I know. It is why he is in the argument for best athlete ever, I think. You know,
Yeah,
him, Bo
him,
Jackson,
Jim
Jim
Thorpe,
Thorpe.
Bo Jackson,
Yeah, because it wasn't even his best sport,
Caitlyn
not by
Jenner.
far.
Hey, don't knock the decathletes, man.
Please no. Yeah, he's the greatest female athlete ever. Anyway, the point being,
He was one of the greatest male athletes ever, so that would by default make him.
so you're putting all this time, all this money, and you're endangering the health of youth athletes
That's
who,
what I wanted to get back to. I was
yes,
waiting for you to get done with that
who
rant so I can get us back on task here.
socking all the way back around. The point is, unless you are in a very narrow window of physical giftedness, genetics, whatever, it's just not in the cards. So
Not only that, as we go forward, even if you are in that window, you can ruin your career when you're 12.
mhm.
The number one risk of arm injuries continues to be year-round play. And I don't usually appeal to experts, but if you
But
know who that is,
he's
there's a
he's
little bit of weight to this argument.
he is the guy you want to go to if you have to have Tommy John surgery.
He's the guy you want to go to if you want to have most sports related injury surgeries.
True, but it's yeah, I know him from pitchers who are, and he went to Dr. James Andrews, so yeah.
He's also the one that spoke out a lot when RG3 was having all his ACL tears.
Okay. I,
Yeah.
I didn't know about that part. Yeah.
Let's see. As baseball continues to be America's pastime, we need to make sure that prevention of injury becomes a number one priority. Yes, that's what I do. Give me your money. There is no question Little League International is working hard to keep your young athletes healthy. From my perspective,
I don't know about that, but
he's playing nice.
I know.
From my perspective, there is no youth baseball league that has done more to promote youth baseball as a safe and healthy sport, particularly Little League's executive staff, along with the rest of Little League International.
And stop making it a televised sport.
Okay.
I was going to get into that rant later, but I'll just leave it there.
Now he's talking about decreasing injuries. This is important, but it's not the important part. Avoid fatigue, event fatigue, seasonal fatigue, year-round fatigue, risk year-round baseball and softball.
Scroll up a little bit real quick to that fatigue thing. So I think we've referenced this, but this bears repeating that your warm-up sets count. That's part of your work. And I mean, you need them because you need to get warmed up, but part of the fatigue is the practices. It's the bullpen sessions. It's the warm-up pitches. It's all of that. That's a lot of throwing. The pitch count isn't the only thing to consider.
And there's two ways to guarantee injury. Start too hard, too fast. So not a proper warm-up if you're lifting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Too hard, too fast. So above your threshold before you're ready for it, or fatigue. Those are the two guarantees for injury. In between that, injuries that occur are usually contact injuries.
Yeah.
And I'll include environmental factors as all contact injuries, like you're on a slippery surface and all of a sudden you slip and your ACL tears, right? But other than those freak events, injuries happen because you didn't warm up enough, and that includes training time up until when you do something, or you're at your fatigue level, but you're still trying to perform at a high level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So one of those two things occurs for most injuries.
This actually gets back to the story I was trying to relate this to, of a big reason people don't finish ranger school is because they get so fatigued they get injured. So if your physical fitness level is high enough that threshold is higher, you have a better chance of making it through. That is part of the point of off-season training, is to get that threshold higher. You're not going to be able to do that if you're still doing the thing. I hope that makes sense.
Parents need to realize that the number one risk factor of arm injuries for youth continues to be year-round baseball or softball. We're talking overuse injuries here now. Mm-hmm. And this is in that fatigue category, but we're going to talk about chronic fatigue, chronic over patterning of a movement. Because when you look at the stress response, you get your stress, then you get a drop because of fatigue, then you get a super compensation, and then you get a big drop. And if you don't let your person rest from that big drop and you keep taking advantage of that super compensation, eventually the body breaks down. Okay, so this is more specific on the recommendations, at least 2 months off each year where they're not playing any type of overhead sports. So, which means parents, this is important. It means when your kid's not in a league for 2 months, you're not taking them to pitching lessons.
So I did that with my son and this is one of my rants about what Bassick was saying was you can spend less money and not put your kid in one of these expensive select travel team things and just get them some private coaching if they want to get better or if they want more practice, and you're going to end up spending less. So in the winter, I would take my son to hitting practice. We would not do any pitching practice, period. Once after several months, and I did more than 2 months because his other sport was an overhead sport. It was swimming.
It's a little different because it's fluid resistance.
Yes,
but,
yes.
But even still, you don't
want
to you want to take that into account. Preferably recommended 3 to 4 months off each year. They're not getting that right now.
That is something Holland, I think he kind of said that when we were listening, but he definitely went into it a little more outside the clip. We have an off season, for crying out loud. And we have very strict rules about when we can start back up with organized team activities. And yet you're doing this to kids. This makes no sense.
Yeah, my pro guys wouldn't even start throwing again until early December. If they left in October, it'd be October, November of just straight up weight room training. And then they would have weight room training plus light throwing, and then weight room training plus some long toss, and then weight room training plus some light bullpens, and then they'd go to training camp and start throwing heavy again. More than one league at a time. This is also a problem. They'll be in, and this also affects the pitch count too, because they'll pitch for one team, and then that team will sit them because of the pitch count, but the other team won't even ask, did you pitch yesterday? No, they're like, oh, you're our number one pitcher. It's time for you to pitch today. And then showcases where they're actually throwing for these coaches and doing their agility drills. This one I deal with a lot, even with my favorite clients and their favorite parents, because they still don't get it. The radar gun. It's all about the velo. And this is not only from a health standpoint, but it's from a burnout standpoint. I'll have a kid come in and be like, yeah, I threw a one hitter, no runs, struck out 5. And I'm like, awesome, high five. And dad will be like, yeah, but he didn't top 79. It's like, who cares? Nobody hit the damn ball.
I think I've referenced this before when we were talking about hard and fast rules. This is one of those cheats that I have or had. Because when I was coaching my son, when I was coaching baseball, I would let people know I'm a trainer. So I let them know my certifications, my expertise on this. So I'm going to be able to tell you and teach you some extra things. And one of the things I would tell them is absolutely never throw a weighted ball. Now, it would not be that hard for you to find some very professional, well done, published studies that throwing a weighted ball will increase your velocity. There's also a very serious risk of screwing up your mechanics and thus messing up your arm.
You used the term that made me disappointed there, Heath. You said never ever throw a weighted ball.
Exactly. But this is why, though. This is why I felt I had to do that. Is because if I thought you were smart enough to understand the nuance, then I would tell you individually, okay, here's actually how you do it and minimize the risk. But when I was talking to the parents and to the kids as a whole, I would say, never ever do this. Because I didn't trust them. I didn't trust the kids or the parents to do it properly.
See, I never took that route. I always give them the, and I think this is where I build trust too, is I always gave them the look. Weighted balls in certain situations can increase velo, but what they also can do is they can throw off your mechanics and they can increase your injury risk. So it's a very nuanced thing we have to do. Let me make sure they're athletically ready for it.
Yep.
And who knows, maybe they'll never need it, but it also could be something that benefits them at some point. We don't know that yet. Let's not jump into anything full on. What I'm going to give you is something that we know works.
This is why I hate group settings and where the personal training comes in, because when you're one-on-one or one-on-two, you can do that a lot easier. I can do that a lot easier than when I'm talking to 12 to 15 kids and their parents.
Hey, I'm not going to go into the last one because that's not my wheelhouse. But what I want to do is bring some charts up. Here's Tommy John surgeries among MLB players.
MLB, these are professional. I'm assuming this also includes the minor leagues, because that is part of the Major League Baseball organization for the most part.
No, among MLB players alone.
Oh, okay.
Another additional 275 in minor league.
Minor league. Okay, so they do split it up.
Yeah. So this is MLB. I don't know what happened in 2013 here, but it did come down, but the overall trend line runs in this direction.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that's when MLB started to get serious about steroids.
Yeah, but usually ligaments are behind muscle development. So
still, they're part of the point of steroids, even for pitchers, was to be able to recover faster and do more work, and thus your conditioning, your strength training is going to fall behind. Maybe. Just a wild guess here.
Well, but also one thing we did see, and I'm going to bring up another. Is that this it? No, that's not it. Here we go. What we did see was shoulder care got a lot better, but elbow injuries went up and up and up and up. And so we've got two factors there, and this is where confounding variables come in. We've got more and more year-round ball, and this is the crop of pros right now that it is the first crop of players that were playing year-round ball. But also shoulder care was such an emphasis for so long because it was the problem. But remember when we brought up our don't ever mobilize a mobile joint? Well, guess what? That mantra carried out. And so all of a sudden people had poor external rotation. Well, what makes up for it? Let's look at this elbow here. This is actually decent external rotation of the shoulder. But if that shoulder stops rotating and that hand keeps going back, then you're going to have stretching of that ligament.
Yeah, we've referenced Eric Cressy before, and one of his clients is Scherzer, who's one of the best pitchers in the majors and has been for a while now. And he'll post some pictures on his social media that are like a freaking yoga pose with Scherzer's arm, cranked back in ways that I can't do. And he's doing it while he's about to throw a high 90s fastball, because he has that much mobility, but also that much stability in his arm to be able to crank that back in external rotation without making the elbow funky.
Yeah. And so we had a two-part equation. We were doing so good with the shoulders that we sacrificed the elbow. But also when you're talking ligament damage, which is usually the elbow, versus rotator cuff damage, which is usually muscular, the year-on ball is playing into it a little bit more.
This is where the doctor's point there about the curveball comes into play, because one of the dangers of the curveball is I was first taught how to throw a curveball by snapping your arm. That will rip your ligaments apart. Now, when you're really young and made out of, rubber and magic, you're not going to feel it. But to your point earlier, this is where the repetitive use comes in. You keep doing that, you're eventually going to feel it. Now, my uncle eventually got to where I could throw a slider because no, don't do that. It's a very nuanced technical thing of you're not twisting your arm, you're not snapping your arm. You're still coming across the top, but then you're snapping your fingers basically. So he taught me how to throw a slider without rocking my arm like that. This is it's kind of a side, but I didn't realize until like I was in high school of why I couldn't play basketball. Not that I cared that much, but I had spent so long snapping my wrist, and nobody had ever told me this before until the guy who taught me how to lift weights properly. We were shooting baskets just as kind of a, cool down, cardio kind of thing. And he's like, you snap your arm when you do that. That's why I couldn't shoot a basketball, because I would always do this. Because I spent so long doing that, throwing a ball. That is not a good thing. And
Is
that's
that
where
why
that
why your woo was a little bent too? You snapped your wrist.
no comment. But that's where and that's where
when
I
you're dating Carrie, you're like, you got to do it like this. You got to do it like this.
snap. There's flashbacks to something about Mary. Anyway, but that's the point he's making about there is a nuance there. That is why there was a part of my brain that says this is wrong when I would say don't ever do this. But the part of my brain that said you have to do this because people are stupid is because I was taught to throw a curveball by snapping my arm, and it jacked up my elbow and my shoulder at a very young age.
Yeah, but I think that's where this is where communication skills come in.
Yeah.
And it's a tougher sell, but sometimes to do the right thing, you have to take the tough road. But yeah, it's the point of all of this is year-round ball is the number one kind of contributor to all of these things that are happening with our youth athletes. It's not helping with the physical fitness, and it's not helping them get to the majors.
No.
And
Yeah.
so
it's not doing any of the things you think or you say that it's doing. And in fact, it is most probably having a negative impact on those things. It is most probably pushing them backwards.
Yeah, of the Cozart brothers, Jared played Major League Ball. Jake made it to what's the highest in minors? Single A?
Triple.
Triple.
One,
So
two,
it goes
three.
reverse. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Triple A with the Red Sox. And the littlest, which was very talented and actually the one I coached first of all of them, he quit. He burned out. He was at Seminole State, which is a JUCO, but it's highly recruited out of to the majors. And he just walked out one day. He didn't want to play no more. And now he works in finance. So
back to our examples. When I finally quit baseball, it was because I had gotten fed up with the way football was done. And so I didn't go out for football that year, but I still signed up for athletics, which was PE, but they wanted to, get extra football practice in around VIL rules. And they called me in like the first day. And, well, you didn't sign up for football. Why are you in athletics? And I said, says, well, I am playing tennis. Well, that's not a real sport. Okay, well, it's a UIL sport and we have a school team and I'm doing that, but sure, fine. And I was going to go out for baseball. Well, you didn't play baseball last year. Okay, well, I've played baseball every year since I can literally remember. But the coaches were such obnoxious jerks. I said, you know what? Okay, because they told me, well, if you don't come out for baseball in the spring, we're going to have a talk. We're going to have issues. And I was like, fine, F you. I didn't say that, but I basically said that. And then I literally went straight to the counselor's office and said, I want to drop athletics and go into something else. And I didn't care what. And that's how I ended up in speech and debate and theater, was from that. And I never went back to organized school sports. I played soccer, which we didn't have a school team. I played club teams. And then I got back into wrestling mostly as I still want to do sports. I just don't want them doing with these people. And that's the principle there of when you have parents and coaches who are pushing this kind of thing. Now we're ranting on baseball because it's one of the most egregious as far as year round and the money spent and all
we
of
talk
that.
female sports, volleyball, and now basketball is going down that route.
Yeah,
and
yeah. I have been introduced to that because I have a niece
soccer.
who does this year-round volleyball stuff. And stop, play some other stuff. Take some time off. You know.
Now, volleyball is more tough from a recruiting standpoint because it doesn't get the publicity that uh, that baseball gets. And so sometimes the only time these kids can get seen is at some of these things.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in like sand volleyball or pairs volleyball, that kind of thing. Uh, and the actual recruiters do put on these things. But now when you're talking normal team volleyball, your school sport, that's different because the recruiters are at the high school games. They're not at the AVA games. It's uh but you're talking the outside UIL type sport, you do need to do all of that. And that's kind of the conundrum there, because do you need to do it as much? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
But which one is the most important? Now we're playing a different game. Now, I hate that we're at the hour, like 45-minute mark here, because I'm getting into the actual my experience as a coach thing. But there's two things I want to go over, and one of them is kind of anecdotal success stories, and then there's also the what we do in those months off from playing that we can't do while they're playing.
Well, then let's tease that as next time. Let's do a part 2 on Friday after we do Wheel of Time, and let's talk a little bit about this, because there's some more stuff I want to talk about too, which is that, and I'll tease my part of it. Of this was kind of one of the failings of the Tea Party versus the Occupy Wall Street movement, because they were talking past each other. And this is what I mean by that is what Mike Bassick was talking about with the money and it's not about the kids in that clip from the radio show is you can call that corporatization. Now, they aren't corporations, and most of these things are probably going to be nonprofits, but that doesn't mean it's not corporatized. You can have something corporatized and it's not a corporation. It's not a business. It could be we kind of talked about this when we were talking about the field rentals for these leagues and these tournaments. That's a city thing. That's a public city government thing, but that doesn't mean it's not corporatized.
Well, and
this is how things become perverted.
Well, and I hate to bring politics back into this, but it's again the St. George without a dragon, right? The Little League, yes, there are people, and I said it earlier, there are people in the organization that don't give a crap. They just want profits.
Yeah.
But amongst the coaches, amongst the organizers, amongst the volunteers, they don't have anything else.
Yeah.
This is their life. Their life is baseball. Their life is developing their kids. And if you say, you know what, there's this whole part of your life or my life that is not part of yours for this much of the year, then you've got that much of the year of lack of meaning.
Yeah.
And I have to do that as a coach. This is why I refuse to specialize in one clientele, because if I only specialized in baseball players and professional baseball players, my life would only have meaning from October to February. That's it.
Yeah. That was kind of the point where we cut him off there, where that Bassick was getting into of, well, of course the parents are competitive. Look at how much money they're spending.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to, even when part of you knows you shouldn't, it's going to make you more serious than you should be, than you need to be.
All right. Well, without those other things, that's pretty much all I had. So I'll have to.
Yeah. So hopefully we have illuminated the subject, and we'll get into it more next time about how this doesn't just apply to baseball. This doesn't just apply to youth baseball. Hopefully that's pretty obvious by this point. But to me, the big picture takeaway is, well, it's never going to change if you don't change it. It's never going to change if you keep participating in it. At some point, you have to say, no, I'm not doing that. And like I said, Bassick talked about that several minutes after we cut off the clip there of, parents, other parents and other coaches saying, hey, you need to, you need to get your kids into the fall ball, winter ball, come help us do this. Cause, this is what was it he said of, that this is where you get your kids seen, and where it was basically recruiting and evaluation for spring ball. Well, that's stupid and pointless. No, my kids are going to go play basketball because they want to play basketball. Yeah, that's the way it should be.
Well, here's my overall takeaway message for people, especially if you're the parent. Look, if your kid's the athlete that you think they are, take fall off and let them develop their body for the spring. And I don't care what coach says. If they're the athlete you think they are, they will make the team. And not only that, they will outperform the other kids and they will be healthy.
I wish I could remember Samson or Simpson, man. I wish I could remember my JV football coach who was a volunteer. The varsity coach was on the high school staff. The JV coach was a volunteer. He was a captain or a major in the Army, and he was a volunteer, and he had played, I want to say he had played a little bit of college ball. And at the end of the season, at the, football banquet thing in the winter, and me and my brother went up to him and we asked him, what do we need to do to get better? Because we know we're about to move and it's South Texas, football's a big effing deal. And he said, cross train, go play some other sports, get better athletically. And he is a big reason I went into wrestling, which I turned out to absolutely love. And it was because he said, because me and my brother said, well, we're thinking about joining the wrestling team. Do it. Absolutely. Go do it. Because that will make you a better athlete. It will give you a break mentally, and it will help you train different skills physically.
Well, and just as a teaser for the next time to close it out, my biggest, and I'll go through the specific examples of this next time. My biggest successes as a strength and conditioning coach, private strength and conditioning coach with baseball athletes, high schoolers especially, was when I convinced a parent to give their kid a season off. And not a season as in a whole year. A season as in fall ball or summer select ball.
That's a season.
Yeah. 3 or 4 months off where I can be in charge of their training and I can do the things I need to do without working around their games, without them throwing 100 pitches before they came in to see me the next day or anything along those lines. And I have a kid that was a good college prospect and he ended up drafted with a $1 million signing bonus. So there's a huge difference between those two things.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, that'll be next time. So we'll do some Path of Daggers, and then we'll do a part 2 with some more of this on Friday. See y'all then.
All right. See you then.